What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into the 4D Chess Dynasty Trade Show. Today's episode in particular is going to be one that's kind of evergreen. You can look at whether this is the week of you're viewing these trades or you're going back a while, because these trades are all going to be trades which were made in the playoffs and in the week preparing up to the championship game. So if you don't have a trade deadline in your league, you already know how you can make trades in the playoffs. These are some to look and think about for your own teams moving forward. But if you do have the trade deadline off, some trades to look at, to think about possibly taking it off. Eric, what's going on? And where do you stand on the trade deadline in leagues for you're in?
Well, what's going on, Adam? Yeah, you're a big basketball guy. It's like I'm like the guy at Duke, you know. I'm that guy, that white guy at the end of the bench that never plays and just waves the towel around the whole time. And I only play when we're up by 75. Yeah,
Gotcha.
here he is, coming off the bench.
Coming off the bench, ready to go. Practice squad guy, ready.
Yeah, exactly. As far as trades with no deadline, I used to fucking hate it. I still kind of hate it, but I'm okay with it now. I just hate people buying championships.
Okay.
At the last second, because we don't do that in any other sport. Every sport, like, there's a deadline. It's just how I've always been. I've been old school like that, so I'm not a big fan of it, but I get it.
So you lean more towards keeping the deadline on at a certain point, whatever that is for your leagues.
Yeah, and I would say probably a majority of my leagues now probably don't have a deadline, so I'm just gonna have to deal with it and get with the times and get off my soapbox there.
No, I hear you. I mean, I don't necessarily. I'll say this: I prefer having the deadline off. I don't think there's a right or a wrong. I think that if you don't prefer to have, like, if you'd like to have the deadline, at least go out and play. Like you just said, you play with some leagues where it's off. If you have the deadline off and you prefer to have it the other way, I got no problem with that. I just think right now what's interesting is like the camp which says, no, we should definitely have a trade deadline. I don't even know if you've tried it, so you don't even necessarily know if you like it. That's my biggest thing. I prefer having it off and being able to trade in the playoffs. The main reason for that is I just think about it from, there's a lot of different ways to look at it, but one of the main reasons is if you're telling me right now we play and we trade for this game, Dynasty, literally the entire time. The only time in which we take it off typically in Dynasty leagues is for 3 weeks in which the money is had. So it's like you can make trades literally right now, today, in January, whenever. But as soon as the money becomes a part, that's when we decide you can't trade. You aren't allowed to make trades. That part to me feels a little bit weird, where like all we do is trade. And then if you want to, you don't have to, but all season, all year, you can trade, even off season. But then as soon as the deadline comes up, it's like, nah, championship week, you get 3 injuries. For example, there was a lot of injuries during the championship week, right? Week 17, guys that got banged up. Waiver wire or nothing. Like, that's, to me, I just don't love that part. I want to be able to fix a problem if I'm able to. Now, to your point, the buying titles is tough, because if some team just happened to sneak into the title game and then make some crazy trades to win a title, that's a little bit tougher. But I want to go over a couple here. We'll start with, always, as Fizz told you, one of our own.
40 chess, yeah. 40 chess, 40 chess, let's get it.
Yo, is that T-Dog?
40 chess, 40 chess, hey, 40 chess, this a trade show. Patreon where the trades go, tap in and watch. That's what you came for. Ain't gotta say my name, they know my name, bro.
What's good, man?
We got McNutted in ATM. Always start off the show with a trade from them. You should always make sure that your trade is in Patreon. Why not be a Patreon? Know you wish you could spend every day with them. Tap in and say what you gonna say with them. South Harmon can fill up a stadium. Next time you log in, make sure that you bring a friend. We about to kick off, let the day begin. Go follow the socials. 40 Chess FF is posted. If your trade is an F, you get roasted. Go like and subscribe for the crew. Apple, Spotify, and the YouTube. You know Cooper got the walk too. Let us give you a walkthrough. 40 Chess. This is 40 Chess.
All right, check this out. So this one's crazy. You're in this league, right? and this is the OG Shit League. Now, this team is, I would say, objectively, okay, you're in there, you can tell me, is objectively my best Dynasty team that I have currently. Really, really good team. Had up some injuries the week of. CeeDee Lamb was one of them. So Mike has Jefferson, and this is going to be a theme of the 2 trades I made, where I'm basically looking to trade away the injured player to someone that's not in the game and doesn't really care, because it's not a long-term injury, right, with CeeDee, for a similar player in Jefferson. Now, obviously, it's going to cost you, and the cost of that for me was Cousins and Chuba, who Chuba Hubbard also was out for the record, and Cousins, he technically was just injured all year. He just isn't the same player, so he wasn't playing as well. Sent those away. I get back Guerendo, Blackshear, and Cooper Rush, who were nowhere near making my lineup in this league. Now, the crazy part is, while I made this, I ended up losing this league, and I won the regular season by over 1,000 points and lost in the title game. But this trade was supposed to try to help me get closer to it. What are your thoughts on this trade in particular for both sides? For me getting Jefferson, Guerendo, Cooper Rush, and Blackshear, and then Mike getting back Chuba, Lamb, and Cousins.
So just off the rip, you going for the championship, I understood it. Like, you know, Rush is playing, Blackshear is playing, Guerendo's playing, Jefferson's playing, all those guys were playing, and your 3 guys that you gave up weren't. So I totally get it from your point of view. You're going for the championship, trying to lock it in. I just think it kind of ultimately backfired for you. I think
For sure, it did.
your team in that league is like a super team. Like, there's just stud after stud after stud.
Right.
I just don't think Rush and Blackshear and Guerendo would have ever made your lineup anyways, unless they just went completely nuclear. Which,
Yeah.
the likelihood of any of those guys going nuclear was like slim to none.
Correct.
So,
Guerendo
in
maybe
my
had the most
opinion-
upside of going nuclear, but yeah, to your point, Cooper Rush and Blackshear are never
Yeah.
nuclear options.
Right. So I think, in my opinion, Mike won this trade for sure. I mean, in hindsight, obviously, because you lost a championship anyways.
Right.
But
Right.
even like if this was just like a week 3 trade, you know, I just think Jefferson and Lamb is literally
Cancels
even.
out. Right.
Chuba Hubbard, he's going to have a job next year as the starting running back again. You know, Blackshear is probably on the waiver wire. Cooper Rush is going to be on the waiver wire. Guerendo has some upside for sure. I mean, I shitted on the guy, you know, during the draft process, but he's not bad.
No.
But you also gave up a potential starting quarterback next year
Cousins,
too, in Kirk
for sure.
Cousins, when he's wearing the brown and orange in Cleveland.
Oh no! Please tell me that's not the case. Actually, that would be, if that was the case, I would be okay with this trade again, because if Cousins goes there, I know he for sure has gone to die in Cleveland. So, I will say, the one thing about this, right, is the Chuba Hubbard part was the toughest one for me, because I do suspect Kirk Cousins will get a job somewhere. What I saw this year, I'm not particularly worried about losing Cousins. I'm kind of feeling like his best days are behind him. That said, he's still an option, especially in best ball like this is, right? 12-team Superflex best ball. Shoot, you don't have to be that good in the NFL to make lineups, right? Cooper Rush didn't make my lineup this week, but he made plenty of lineups in best ball. So both of those were tough. I think when I look at this in hindsight, right, I don't necessarily care that I was losing the trade on the surface. Cooper Rush and Blackshear, like Cooper Rush actually is fine for me to take on because Mike didn't care about him. But Blackshear was the piece I asked for a kick in. Obviously, hindsight's 2020 with how bad he was and how much they got blown out. He didn't hardly even get touches. But that piece for me is one that I should have asked for more for. The biggest problem with this was, like, I knew I had pieces I needed to clean up on my roster to make it better and better looking for the title game. Ultimately, it didn't matter, though, because there's not that many pieces that you can go buy where it's going to make it that much better without trading away better assets than just CeeDee here. So, also, he ended up buying, you want to talk about buying titles, he bought within the same week, if you were going to advocate for it off, he got Olamide Zaccheaus and Mike Evans the week before. So he didn't have those guys on his team, and all of a sudden he got 2 30-burger players on his team, which ended up being the reason he beat me in this title.
Yeah, I think I actually gave him one of those guys. So
You probably did. So yeah, no, it's okay. I now I get it. You're like, listen, fuck you, Adam. You know, it's okay. I want you to lose this. I want to see this super team lose.
I just think in just hindsight, though, like kind of thinking about it, like I think you overthought it, in my opinion. Like you're like, oh man, I got to get all these guys that are playing. Like I think you just kind of overthought it a little bit.
Would you have just let CeeDee and Chuba and Cousins not play on your team?
Unless I was getting like guys that have a future, because I think you got two guys that are just like complete zeros next year in Blackshear and Rush.
For sure. For sure.
That's just my only problem. Like Lamb, Hubbard, Cousins are all going to be, fantasy starters next year.
Sure.
So that's just kind of was my thinking.
Yeah, Cousins, I'll say this. I don't actually necessarily guarantee. Like, I didn't view Cousins as a guaranteed piece that's going to start next year. I definitely think I lost. I definitely think I lost out on the Chuba piece. I feel like Guerendo actually though is a piece in lineup where I would love to have him in best ball. We'll see if he ends up making if he gets enough of a share of the backfield wherever he is. It's going to be Frisco, but the biggest thing is going to be his Mason back, and then how does CMC look next year for him? Blackshear and Rush are going to probably end up being cut off my team, frankly. So those pieces were big. I'm kind of curious to see how it moves in the offseason. The one reason why, I'll give you a little nugget that we'll find out if I'm right or wrong about this. I just very much feel like, especially coming off the season he has, whereas CeeDee's coming off of a down year relative to the year prior, I still think Jefferson actually is going to have a bigger market than CeeDee will. I'm not necessarily saying that's right or wrong. I just view like Jefferson is one of those pieces I feel like people will pay typically a little more for than CeeDee. And this year with him coming off of this season he had with Darnold, I feel like that's still the case. Now, that trade definitely was not as good as this one, and also I lost the title. This one here, I made this trade here, which is Lamar Jackson I'm getting for Jalen Hurts in a third. Jalen Hurts, I made this trade before he was technically ruled out, but with the concussion, it was very likely for me, and I didn't want to risk it. What is your thoughts here of getting rid of a third to go get the secure Lamar in this trade?
I love this trade for you. Getting
Okay.
Lamar here, and then dealing away Jalen, and you only have to give up a pick. I mean, you're basically moving in the same tier, so I like that. I don't like to trade these stud quarterbacks, and move down a tier or two. Like that's just not something I do.
Sure.
So you stayed in the same tier. You only had to give up a pick for it, and to kind of guarantee yourself a championship or a run at it. Then hell yeah, I love this trade. And then Lamar went out and put up 30 points. Dude might win his third MVP this year. He's just crazy good right now.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and this was kind of what I was hoping to try to do with the other trade that I made prior. That one was made with like an hour before the game, so definitely, I know I got my nuts squeezed a little harder in that one. Whereas this trade here, I think if you think about it from this standpoint, if you're rebuilding, sure, you'd like. This is one of the things I want to talk about in the offseason a little bit more. But if you're out of the playoffs, right? You're out of the playoffs. You're not in the championship game. You're like, okay, well, you want Lamar because he's playing, and you want to try to get more than a third out of this person. But let's say that person doesn't give that up to you, but you just lost out on a free third for really no reason. If you view these players as similar, now that's the biggest thing and ultimately the biggest caveat. Some people may not view Lamar and Hurts in the same tier. I do. So if you're trading within the same tier and you view the same player or these two players as similar assets, while it's not nearly the same price as the player itself, that's a free third that you wouldn't have otherwise had. So that's why I viewed it as a win for both sides. Ultimately, I really did not want to have Hurts on my lineup, and I would have probably explored some other things, but I knew how Mike feels about these players, and I knew that there was a reasonable chance that a third got it done for him. So that's ultimately why we went with this one.
I look at it, too, as if we are doing a brand new startup Superflex league right now, Lamar and Jalen Hurts probably both go within the first 5 to 6 picks.
Exactly.
So,
and they could even be back-to-back picks, right?
Right, exactly. So just to give up a third for that is probably what you might do in a startup trade. Like, hey, I want the 104. I'll give you my 105 and a third. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
So something like that is totally reasonable. So, yeah, I like this trade.
Yeah, and I think also the one thing, too, is where in a best ball league, especially where we're starting 13 with 35, 40 roster spots, whatever it is, those thirds are even a little more meaningful because of how many people you have to have on your team. So those are my two trades that I made up into the titles. I did win the Rusty Tromboners, absolutely smoked them over 100, and I lost the shit one. So sometimes you try to influence the game with the way it is, but the chips are going to fall where they may. Here's a trade from Mr. Wonderful, who seems to make it every single week. He's trading like crazy. This trade here is Fishy is getting Chuba Hubbard a 26 first and a 26 third for Saquon Barkley. So here's another player, right? Chuba Hubbard ended up being put on IR right before the deadline, or right before the championship game, excuse me. So a 12-team, 2-quarterback, 2-tight-end PPR, 0.25 points per carry, which is pretty heavy. Tight end premium is pretty much irrelevant, 1.25. Best ball start 12. So in this trade here, Chuba Hubbard injured, you're out of the playoffs. A first and a third, or Saquon Barkley. Which side do you like here, Eric?
I think I am fine with the Barkley side here. We've seen what he could do with this Eagles offense, with that offensive line. That offensive line isn't changing. Like, this dude should be a top 5 running back, with Philadelphia as long as he's there. Chuba's a good player. He did really good this year. He's probably a top 15, 17, 18 running back. So it's not like he's could be RB1 like a Barkley could. And then you give up a first and a third for the following season. It's not even this upcoming draft class. So,
right.
I think I like the Barkley side here. And then especially with Barkley going for these records and stuff during that for championship week.
Yeah.
You've seen what he put up. It was like 160 something yards.
167. He went crazy, man. Yeah.
Yeah. This was the type of trade that you needed to make because, they're going to do everything in their power to give Barkley the ball, and Kenny Pickett starting with busted ribs.
Yep.
So yeah, Barkley's gonna fucking kill it. And he did.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, this is one of those trades, I'll say, where I definitely get it, though. I get it for both sides. Now, if you're Mr. Wonderful, and I haven't looked yet at his team. I'm looking at the league right now. Fresh Fish is the league. And when I look at it, right, I guess I view it as this. If I'm in a rebuild and I have Barkley, it's very tough to take it's very hard to get a rebuild going in a best ball league where we're starting 12 without you have to multiply assets. So like Barkley, of course, has been smashing this year, and giving him to a team in the title is like, damn, that's going to really help boost them. But you have to get the correct assets out. So if I can down tier to a Chuba and get a first, and I'm also getting a third tossed in, maybe in your market you can get more, right? The only I guess counterpoint I would say to that is that could you have gotten more elsewhere? I don't necessarily know. Definitely not in the title game because there's only one other team in the title probably. So I view it as, I think, still a good trade for Fishy, especially because you got the Chuba piece out of Mr. Wonderful. But if you're Mr. Wonderful on his side, right, where I think it's also a win for him, is like if you're in the position in best ball to actually consolidate assets, if you are one of the top teams and you're able to do this, like this is just, it's easy to make that type of a trade when you know for sure I only have 1 week to win. So that's why I really like it for Mr. Wonderful side as well as for Fishy side. I'm curious if you had any other thoughts on it too.
No, I mean, I think you pretty much hit it, nail on the head there. And, I'm guessing he won his championship with the way Barkley performed. So
for sure.
Yeah, pretty good trader.
All right, I like it. I think this one kind of speaks for itself. Let's see if we get any other craziness here. Ooh. All right, what do you think of this one? This one's nothing too crazy here, but it's Dallas Goedert and a second are being acquired for Hunter Henry and Isaac Guerendo. Shockwave 360 is getting Goddard in the second, and he's sending to young Simba, Hunter Henry, and Guerendo. So what are your thoughts on this one? Is this a little bit too steep, or do you think this is fine for going for the title in the week of the playoffs?
Yeah, I think this was fine going for it in hindsight for the title. Hunter Henry provided you 0 points, so he didn't do jack shit.
He might as well have been hurt, right?
Right. But Goddard and Henry, if you look at it like a dynasty rankings wise, they're probably pretty close to each other. Then a second for Guerendo. I think you paid a little bit of premium because Guerendo is playing right now, and he had a starting job and all that. So I think it's a fair trade. It probably didn't work out for the guy who got Henry and Guerendo, unfortunately.
Right.
But that's the risk you take sometimes when you do these trades.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about it, right? Hunter Henry, I don't actually know this for sure. I would venture to say, though, that was his only actual zero. So you make a trade like this, you also have to understand that what can happen any given week in variance is just the reality of life. Like, Hunter Henry's not guaranteed to give you anything super special. It is a lineup start 10. So when you pivot off of the Goddard to Henry thing, I think the biggest part for me where I don't care about that is I normally don't care about that position. And if I know, like, I haven't looked at his team yet, but if I know that Goddard's the guy I normally play, I don't have a whole many other tight ends. If I'm just guaranteed to play Henry, I'm fine with that pivot. A second for Guerendo, I probably would not pay unless I'm in the title game. Now, if I'm in the title game and I need a running back, this is not a problem for me to pay that 25 second. Now, hindsight 2020, Guerendo was okay. He was mid, right? The one thing about it for the championship week where you got lucky, the 12 points he put up was honestly just as good as some other really great names for that week. So I'd be curious to see if if Young Simba won the title or not. But I will say getting a second for Guerendo typically in process, if I'm on the other end, if I'm on Shockwave side, I love that. Like, the reality is Guerendo, he's an exciting prospect. He's a fast player that can hit a home run on any play. But he has absolutely no guarantees to have a job. Whereas that second in value now, we're going into the draft season here pretty soon. I'd rather have that in a team that's not in the title for sure.
Right. Yeah, that second is going to probably be a running back coming out in this draft class, and this draft class is absolutely loaded with running backs.
Yeah,
that are probably going to be better than Guerendo anyways.
And most drafts happen, and I'm looking at this one. I would imagine this one happens where the draft is after the NFL draft. So if I can draft a player that I feel like is going into a good situation, has decent draft capital, has a good chance at getting a run early. Not that the Guerendo didn't get on the field, but why did he get on the field? CMC got hurt. Mason got hurt. If I can have my pick of the litter in the second round of this class, I like that quite a bit. I think it's a fair trade, though. So far, none of the trades that I've watched. One thing that does suck, to your point, if you don't like the deadline, or if you prefer to have the deadline on, one of the things that sucks, and I haven't seen a trade like this yet. This one maybe is a little bit more spicy, where you look at the trade and you're like, if this is not championship week, there's 0% chance it gets done. Those type of trades suck because you feel like this is how do I want to put it? This is just a trade that should not happen. And that if you see a lot of those trades in the championship week, I can understand why people end up not wanting to have the deadline off, because you feel like people are not running their team appropriately. This one here is very interesting. Ryan D is he's getting CeeDee Lamb and sending away Brian Thomas. So Robbie Ruxin is getting Brian Thomas for CeeDee straight up. I think Brian Thomas has had a absolutely stellar season. If you think about the fact that Malik Neighbors is having a historic season, as is Brock Bowers, but Brian Thomas has more receiving yards than both of them. Just to give you some context of how good it's been. I also think it's been a little bit heavier in the back half where there's absolutely nothing in Jacksonville to throw the ball to aside from Brian Thomas. So CeeDee for BTJ, where are you at on this trade?
I mean, honestly, I think it's a win-win for both sides.
Yeah.
If you traded for Brian Thomas to win your championship, he performed awesome for you in the championship game and probably helped you win.
Yep.
And then on the other side, you're getting CeeDee Lamb, who I think is going to be slightly valued higher in dynasty circles over Brian Thomas. But like Brian Thomas is right on his heels. So
yeah.
CeeDee Lamb still top 3 guy. Brian Thomas is definitely top 8, probably. So yep. I don't think it's like egregious or anything. I think it was a fair deal. And I think both sides ended up winning ultimately.
Yeah, I think, well, definitely. So here to your point, right? BTJ, especially since he delivered in production, because what you make this trade because one guy is guaranteed to give you no production, the other one's playing and has been on a heater. Also in Dynasty, what is nice is to try to have your cake and eat it too. Although you'd much rather have CeeDee Lamb, having the guy that can give you production right now that's also a young rookie, it's very enticing. But then Brian Thomas delivers a top 12 week last week with 23.9 in standard PPR, which is what this is. So if you can make this trade and you can tell me for sure, like if you told me right now, Eric, remove the names. You told me you're gonna have to move off of a tier 1 receiver and go to a tier 2 receiver, but you knew factually it would be a top 12 finish on the week, I'd make this trade because I think that's what's gonna help you win, right? So that's where you win for sure if you get BTJ. It'll be very interesting to see how his stock ends up moving up and down based on if he has a dip at all next year in production or if he ends up being better. Be very interesting to see that. But CeeDee Lamb, to your point, if you're on the other end, why you take it is because he solidified himself as a tier 1 receiver, and we all feel that way about him moving forward.
Here's one to ask you real quick.
Yeah.
Startup league right now. You're doing a startup. Are you taking Brian Thomas Jr. or are you taking Marvin Harrison Jr.?
It's a great question. It's a great question. So Fizz and I were talking about this on AMA, and I'll give you, for me, I still lean Marv and the reason I do that is because I'm someone that likes to trade a lot, and I think, and I could be wrong on this, I think his market is more stable, meaning he's likely, if he plays better next year, going to go up, where his floor is going to take him a little longer to dip. I think Brian Thomas is probably close to his peak value. The only way he goes up is if he continues to play like a top 2-3 receiver for the rest of next year. I will say though, it's not very. It's like by a hair. I also said that I put those guys in the same tier now. And if you told me you want Brian Thomas ahead of Marv, I got no problem with it. I just personally think that if Marv and Kyler can get on the same page in the offseason like they've talked about doing, Marv, I think, has a lot more to go up.
Right.
What do you think?
I think it's like you said. It's like by a hair. They're probably like 6 and 7, 7 and 8 in the rankings.
Yeah.
It's literally pick whoever you want there.
Yep.
We've seen Brian Thomas Jr. do it, and he did it with Mac Jones and Trevor Lawrence.
Yep.
Whereas Marvin has Kyler Murray, and he's going to continue to have Kyler Murray. And I also am down on Kyler Murray. So
sure, same.
Just kind of whichever flavor you want there.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think what'll be very interesting to see is when next year starts, like with Christian Kirk back. I'm not saying Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram are like the best weapons out there, but they likely will bring on more target competition, and we'll also see what Jacksonville does in the draft if they, what their coaching situation is, all
Your
that.
Coaching staff,
hopefully,
too.
Exactly.
GM.
Right. So, and all that I think the thing about it with BTJ, when you look at his season, it was pretty clear, like, as soon as especially Ingram got hurt, when that was, like, the final leg of competition for him, and Trevor Lawrence has targeted him like crazy. Last year, he led all tight ends in targets. The targets went nuclear for him after that, and it was Mac Jones, and it was 10 targets plus every single game. So if you just – the reason I'm a little bit more hesitant, if you told me his targets were closer to, like, 6 or 7 a game, he's not in that elite share. But if you told me that his targets were going to stay, like, the second half of the year – BTJ could go to the moon. He could go absolutely crazy. I'm just a little bit fearful of that staying long term. So,
right.
I think right now, like if I'm Ryan D, I love this trade. If I'm Robbie Ruxin, I don't love it as much until I see BTJ be a top 12 on the week. And now I'm saying, forget it. Like if you told me right now I only had to tier down from one tier and I stay young, like okay, yeah, fine. I'll lose that happily if I get to win my title, right? I'll lose that happily if I get to win my title. All right, we got the last trade here, my friend. So we only got a few trades this week because this is, how many deadlines are off and how many people are making trades the day of the championship or week of, I should say. This one here, oh my goodness, this one hurts. Not because of the trade and the capital you spent, honestly. This one just hurts because what a fucking poor time to pick up Achane. He missed my lineup, Eric, in that goon squad you talked about. He missed my lineup in that week because, unfortunately, man, without Tua, this offense just moves differently. So Achane is, for those who don't see this and you're listening to audio, the trade is Slenmo is acquiring Achane. He is sending away a hurt Montgomery. Doesn't matter. Brenton Strange, if he's hurt or not, and a 26 first. So you send away your own 26 first, plus Monty is really, in essence, the trade for Achane. I mean, we know what we know in hindsight, but thinking about it without that in mind, what are your thoughts on this trade here? It's a just standard lineup league.
I mean, I think getting Achane here is the play. That was the win. I mean,
Yeah.
even though he had a terrible week 17, you still win this trade, in my opinion. Like, Montgomery is like a RB 20, 25, somewhere in that range.
Right.
And you give up next year's first, and you get Achane, who's a top 8 running back, maybe even higher than that in
Sure.
Dynasty. Yeah, I love this trade to get Achane. Even though it didn't work out for you in the championship game, I love this trade for you. Absolutely.
Yeah. And the reason I said it was tough is just because of the results, right? I will say, so I actually, in a league where I had a little bit of excess at running back, Eric, I ended up winning the title, so I got away with it. But I traded away Achane for a first and a second, and it was just more of a process play in the offseason. This is an offseason. And as I look back on that trade, I mean, I won the title, so sometimes that's better than whatever the outcomes are in trades, but it's one I wouldn't do again, right? I'd rather have Achane than a random first and a second. That person missed the playoffs, so it's now a 106, which makes it a little bit more forgivable. I'll just say that Achane, what's nice about this is even though you definitely didn't get the results out of him you want, and he was not the reason you won your title if you did. What's nice about this play is moving after, right? A lot of times you look at a trade like this with Brian Thomas, right, for example, and you can say to yourself, as soon as the championship game's over, I won't like it as much. This is one of those trades where, realistically, like, your asset of these in the trade is still going to be the best in the offseason, too. So that's where I think there's a little bit of a chess play where it makes so much more sense to get Achane here, is because when you look at it, as soon as the title game's over, you could still argue your side. And if that's the case, I feel like the person on the other end didn't ask for enough.
Yeah, 100%. So, and Montgomery's only going to be another year older going into next year.
Right.
By the time that 2026 first comes into play, Montgomery's going to be 2 years older. Who knows if he's even on the Lions at that point, too. Whereas Achane is going to definitely still be on Miami, still rocking it. So, yeah, I love this trade.
Yeah, and if you look at it, right, so Montgomery, 27.6, basically shortly after the season starts next year, he's going to be turning 28. And we saw this year that there are running backs that are aging fine, and that age is not a death sentence to running backs. But what it is a death sentence to is the upside in your market, right? Those players don't ever have an Achane type of a market where you're 23, going to be 24, and people are looking at you as a win now piece and a future piece. So that part is drastic. The other thing with Montgomery, as much as I like him, and he's defied the odds a little bit this year, he's always still, while in Detroit, going to have Gibbs in his way. Achane, for this season, showed you that he's going to be, despite his size, the bell cow in Miami, the guy that gets all the work. I'm very interested to see what happens with Achane in the offseason, because if you look at it this year, he actually produced very well. Obviously not in the most meaningful week for title week, but their offensive line was abysmal. If they can improve that at all, if Tua can stay healthy, like, there's a lot more, I feel like, meat on the bone still with a guy like Achane. So I personally like Slim-Mo's side here. I get it for Katak, but I just think you probably could have asked for another piece that wasn't Strange. Like, if you told me that Strange piece is a second now, or a player that's a little more consequential, I think I might be okay with it. I just feel like the Strange part of this in a lineup start 11, 1.25 tight end premium is fucking irrelevant, bro. Like, I don't care about it at all.
Yep. Yeah, and Strange isn't even the starter next year. It's Ingram still.
Right.
Likely, so.
Yeah, exactly. It just, I think I would have asked for a different piece. That would have been my biggest point of there, but that's all I got, man. That's the trade show for the week. Small number of trades, but I think that's a quick show to kind of give you some of the trades that went down for the title game. And I don't know, the way I viewed all those trades, Eric, they're not some where if you looked at it like, what the fuck are we doing here? Like, how bad was this trade? Someone just went to make a trade that's ridiculous for the title. I feel like all of those were they were relevant dynasty trades to now, and they're not outrageous wins for one side or the other. So what did you think of the trades this week?
Yeah, I think they were pretty solid. I don't think there was any egregious ones like you talked about. And you could see the logic behind the trades before the game started. Now maybe after the results, you see the results. Okay, now we can play Monday morning quarterback and see. Oh man, I would have done that now.
Yeah.
But at the time, like Hunter Henry, he was the most targeted player on the Patriots, and Drake May was just throwing his way. They just had an absolutely awful game against the Chargers, and he got a big 0. Guerendo was starting. He just only had like 12 points, like you said, so it wasn't like he went off crazy. So yeah, I mean, in hindsight, yeah, some of those trades might have sucked, but I think overall the trades were pretty solid.
Yeah, and they had, to your point, there was at least, like, even if I didn't agree with it or you didn't agree with it or whoever's watching, if you didn't agree with it, you can at least point to, all right, I understand what the goal here was, right? I understand what you're trying to accomplish here to either win a title or why you're taking the other piece on, the other side on for the future. So as long as the trades are done in that manner, I feel like we should be, unless you have a problem where those are not going to be the case, I feel like we can be adults enough to have the deadline off. You know, the problem why we put it on is because we feel like somebody's going to do something completely out of line and something really dumb, which is going to make it not fun for everybody else in the league. So that's my thoughts on it. Let us know what you think, 1, of the trades, and 2, if you have the deadline on or off, and if you're really bullish on one side or the other. Let us know down in the comments. But that's all we got. Eric, I appreciate you hopping on, my man.
Always, man. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. All right, we'll see you back here. Same time, same place. Even though the football season's just finishing, really, for the regular season, trades never stop in Dynasty. So we'll see you back here, same time, same place next week. We're out of here. Peace.